Saturday, March 17th is St. Patrick's Day, but it's also Florida Panthers Pro Wrestling Day. When the Panthers take on the Edmonton Oilers, big hockey game, puck drops at 2 p.m. at the BB&T Center in Sunrise. Before the game, you're going to have indie wrestling with Coastal Championship Wrestling, and after the game, you're going to have a unique opportunity to be a part and listen to a podcast, Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard from Impact Wrestling formerly, and also, as you know, Brother Love, iconic figure from the WWE back in the day. And here he is now. First question I'm going to pose to you, Bruce. Conrad Thompson will be joining you with the podcast. It was the 2017 Sports Podcast of the Year by Sports Illustrated. Has Dr. Tom Prichard been a guest on the show yet?
Well, you know, we don't do guests. It's that there's no guest needed on Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard because we just kind of go back and we do a deep dive into what happened when, and we pick one topic. We let our audience vote on what they want to hear about, and then we just do our research and have a lot of fun. Dissecting it, if you will.
I feel a little bad for Dr. Tom that he won't be able to be a guest.
Yeah, well, you know, we have our own, and Tom, if anybody could break that rule, it would have to probably be Dr. Tom.
Yes. All right, so this is interesting because you've actually done this before with the podcast. You were at the Barclays Center for a Brooklyn Nets game, correct?
That is correct. Yes, we were.
How did that idea come about where I know sports fans are pro wrestling fans. Movie fans are pro wrestling fans. Athletes are pro wrestling fans. Entertainers, they all love it. So, but what came up with the idea, hey, let's try to incorporate this with a pro sport and do something there?
Well, the folks at the Brooklyn Nets and Barclays Center reached out to us and asked us if it would be something we would be interested in. And everything you just said, we're like, well, of course, because those are the listeners that listen to our podcast each and every week. And, you know, I just did an interview right before this where they were asking me, why hockey? And I said, you know, if there was a sport, one sport that I would have to pick that would be more conducive to our humor, our brand of storytelling, it's hockey fans, because they love the brutality of the game, and they are the most passionate fans that you're going to find anywhere. So they're raucous, they're wild, they're rowdy, and we're talking about free food, free booze, and us, it doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, how could I not mention that? That's right. If you go to the game, you're going to get free food and free beverages as well. And that in itself is an added bonus. Now, you mentioned hockey. I'll tell you this, Florida Panthers defenseman Keith Yandle, huge wrestling fan, huge WWE fan. He's had WrestleMania parties he's hosted. He watches the Royal Rumble. He really gets into it. There's one guy right there. And then there's another guy. Now, I don't know if you're going to remember this one. Bruce, Craig DeGeorge, back in the day. He was there only a couple of years, and it was a while ago, and he did some backstage interviews and did some promos with the guys and all. Well, it's Craig Minervini, and actually Craig is the pre- and post-game host for Florida Fox Sports, where they cover the Panthers games. He's the guy there. So there is a little bit of wrestling history with Craig Minervini going to be there at the game doing his job. And back in the day, he was Craig DeGeorge. So there you go with some little bit of Panthers tie-in with the whole wrestling theme for that day, Bruce.
Yeah, exactly. And so then we'll cap it all off and just let everybody have a lot of fun. And the beautiful thing about our live shows is we get to tell the stories that we just can't tell on the podcast because we trust our live audience that what happens at the live shows stays at the live shows, and the only way you can be a part of it and hear some of those special stories is by being there live and in living color, as we used to like to say.
Well, Bruce, I know you don't have guests then per se, but would you be up to having Keith Yandle or Craig Minervini with you guys during the podcast at some time during the day, or that's not part of the protocol there for you guys?
No, absolutely. We'd love to have them come be a part of it. And frankly, we have a very special is going to join us on Saturday that is probably the holy grail of guests in the wrestling business that is going to be a part of our show on Saturday. It's going to be a surprise, so I don't want to announce it yet, but I will make this promise. He will not disappoint, and as far as a wrestling fan goes, other than, it will not be Vince McMahon, but other than having Vince McMahon, this is going to be the best guest you could possibly ever imagine.
Oh, that's awesome. That'll be great, and this will be a great event, great happening, Saturday, March 17th, Florida Panthers Pro Wrestling Day at the BB&T Center in Sunrise. You're going to get a great hockey game, you're going to get some wrestling action for him, and you're going to have a podcast of the year afterwards, which will be
two-time podcast.
Oh, it's two-time. We're doing two-time.
Exactly.
Oh, well, Bruce, we're going to wrap it up. A few more questions. Tell us, too, I know you just talked about it a little bit, just tell us more about the podcast. What made you start this podcast and the idea to do it your way, this way, Conrad's way?
Well, we were sitting around at Conrad's house one day, and I was telling some stories, and after one particular story, he said, that would make a great podcast. And I laughed and said, that's something that's never going to happen. But he stayed after it, was very persistent. And after asking me about 100 times, after the next couple weeks, we decided to tape a few, try it out, and the rest, as they say, is history. They told us if we could get to 10,000 listeners that would be really good. Our first show, the first week, we did 61,000 downloads, and 6 weeks later we were averaging over 300,000, and we just didn't look back after that and kind of continued on our way.
Bruce, that's got to make you feel really great, too, because you've been doing Impact Wrestling, you were doing Impact Wrestling, I should say, and the Brother Love character was a while ago, but that's got to make you feel good that many fans, that many people would listen to it because you haven't been as involved as when you were Brother Love.
Right, and it's an extremely humbling experience, especially for the live shows that people go out of their way to come and sit with us live. But it's humbling when you look at the number of people that download and listen to our shows and come up to me and say, hey, I listened to your show and it got me through a rough time. I've got a few. Well, more than a few people that are on dialysis and chemo that write me letters telling me about how their time goes. They don't even think about the treatment because they're listening to the podcast. And I'm like, this is some heavy stuff. I'm just telling stories. But it's amazing to me, and it really makes you feel good that people care. That was another part where I thought, who's really going to care what I have to say and what stories I have? And the audience has shown that they do care, and they've supported us in droves, and it's a pretty neat feeling.
You never know who you're going to reach, even by sharing just a fun, entertaining, truthful story. It's amazing, especially with social media and everything that's going on these days with that. Hey, I know you mentioned that Dr. Tom can't be a guest per se, although you could bend the rules. Now, I'm wondering, though, Dr. Tom does a really good Rowdy Piper impersonation. I think I'm on to that. I'm wondering, does Bruce Prichard have any good wrestling impressions?
No, none at all. So, especially the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, the second most recognizable athlete in the entire world, baby. It's funky like a monkey. The women's head and the men's regret. What you see is what you get, and what you don't see is even better yet.
Funny story with Dusty. And by the way, very good, Bruce Prichard. Bringing it strong. Funny story Howard Brody told me one time where anytime they were on the road traveling and they passed any type of cows or farmland, Dusty would break out the Green Acres theme song. Which I thought was that's Dusty. That's just Dusty.
Whenever we were stuck for a country song and a line in a country song, we would call Dusty in the middle of the night. It was so funny because when Dusty would know we'd be on the road, and Jerry Briscoe and I in particular would call him and ask him something, or we would sing to him, and he would always go, y'all are terrible. But John Cena and I were in St. Louis one time, and we couldn't think of the beginning of it was a Waylon Jennings song, but it was we are. So it's 4 o'clock in the morning where Dusty is, and we call him, and I'm cracking up because I said, you know, John, he sees John Cena on there, so of course he's going to answer. And he answers, he's like, what up, kid? And he says, we need a line. And without hesitation, we wake him from a dead sleep. And the honky-tonk in Texas was my natural second home. Will you tip your hat to the ladies in the Rose of San Antonio? And we took it from there, hung up on him, and we started singing.
That's hysterical. That's great. And that is true Dust right there. And Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, all country music. Holy mackerel. Big Dust. Oh, that's great. That's great. All right, so Bruce, want to thank you taking for some time today to do this. Saturday, March 17th. You'll be here. Conrad Thompson will be here. Florida Panthers Pro Wrestling Day at the BB&T Center in Sunrise. And I want you to finish it off with just give us another good promo of why fans should come out for the big hockey game, for some wrestling action, and then obviously for your 2-time Sports Podcast of the Year. But I'll ask you this first, then you can wrap it up. Since it's St. Patrick's Day, will Bruce Prichard and Conrad Thompson be celebrating St. Patrick's Day with us in South Florida after the podcast?
I'm Irish, so of course I am. I try to celebrate St. Patrick's Day as often as I possibly can, being from, Irish descent. So I will absolutely be celebrating, and Conrad likes to celebrate every chance he gets as well. And we want everybody in South Florida, man, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, so everywhere, Hollywood, everywhere down there, to come on out because you're going to get some of the best damn independent wrestling that there is, followed by world-class hockey with the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers. That's going to be crazy in and of itself. And to cap it all off, the #1 wrestling podcast in the entire world today, Something to Wrestle With, Bruce Prichard and Conrad Thompson, where we are going to, you think we tell crazy stories on the podcast? Man, wait until you hear the stories we can't tell on the podcast. And the only way to do that is to be there live this Saturday. And joining us will be the absolute best guest, the Holy Grail of wrestling personalities will be with us this Saturday night in Sunrise, Florida, and I cannot wait.
You know what you're doing, sir. Awesome job. Thank you so much, Bruce.